AB 1695.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. AB 1695 seeks to address the problem of straw purchases that lead to gun violence in our communities by cracking down on the knowingly false reporting of guns as lost or stolen. Specifically, AB 1695 makes deliberately filing a false report with the intent to deceive that a firearm has been lost or stolen a misdemeanor that prohibits that person from owning a firearm for 10 years. Filing this false report is understood to be a common tactic of straw purchasers who are trying to place distance between themselves and a gun that will be used in a crime. As we know, in San Bernardino, the shooters acquired their guns through a straw purchaser. A straw purchaser is a legal buyer of a firearm who then illegally sells it to someone, such as an individual, on the prohibited persons list. By adding those who file these false reports to the prohibited persons list, we will prevent them from straw purchasing again and deter them from doing it in the first place. This is an alternative approach to tackling the question of lost and stolen firearms, which has repeatedly earned the governor's veto. And this bill before you is based off of Pennsylvania's House Bill 1845 of 2008, which received broad bipartisan support. Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues, for your consideration. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, and I have with me a witness, Ari Freelick, with the Law Center to Reduce Gun Violence.
Thank you.
Good morning again. I'm going to echo the Assemblymember, the sponsor's statements. Gun traffickers and straw purchasers fuel our nation's epidemic of gun violence by supplying deadly weapons to dangerous and prohibited persons. In many instances, law enforcement and prosecutors may not have sufficient evidence to prove beyond reasonable doubt a gun trafficker intentionally sold firearms to a prohibited person or with intent to circumvent our gun laws. In these instances, however, there may be sufficient evidence to prove the gun trafficker attempted to conceal their involvement in gun trafficking rings by filing a knowingly false and deceptive report that their firearm was lost or stolen. This legislation would help deter and combat such behavior by specifically criminalizing the act of knowingly filing these deceptive reports to law enforcement about the loss or theft of a firearm. This offense involves intentional deception and obstruction of law enforcement efforts to keep guns out of dangerous hands and should be treated accordingly. We urge you to vote aye.
Thank you.
Nick Wilcox on behalf of the 27 chapters of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. We've been working towards a bill to require reporting of lost and stolen firearms, and Assemblymember Bonta is correct. We've had a difficult time with that. The gun lobby has always said, in opposition to our efforts, that a straw purchaser only needs to report the gun lost and stolen when it's traced back to him. This is an attempt to close that loophole. So when somebody is a straw purchaser, they're committing a crime, and when they file a false report, they're committing a second crime. And so I would think that the gun lobby would support this bill. They should, although we'll see. We think this is a good approach, and we thank Assemblymember Bonta for carrying this, and we're in full support.
Thank you. Others in support of the bill? Are there speakers in opposition to the bill? Would you like to begin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roy Griffith speaking on behalf of the California Rifle and Pistol Association and the National Rifle Association. We're opposed to this bill for the most part because it's unnecessary regulation. There's already numerous regulations on the books to make false report illegal. I was a law enforcement officer for 32 years prior to taking on this job, and the last thing law enforcement needs is duplication of regulations and additional bills to have to memorize, or additional laws to have to memorize and enforce. This bill victimizes the victim, an individual who has already been burglarized and items stolen from them, remembers months down the road that, oh my gosh, I forgot about Grandpa's firearm that was locked away with the rest of them. I seldom use it. It's in the back of my safe. Now I either report it and, criminalize myself, or I don't report it and I make myself a criminal when I had no intention of being a criminal. So for those reasons, we strongly oppose this bill.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Craig DeLuz, representing the Firearms Policy Coalition and California gun owners. Gun owners of California. Yeah, as my colleague has stated, the biggest challenge here is that if someone mistakenly reports a firearm stolen, it is basically left up to the discretion of law enforcement and the prosecuting attorney to decide whether or not the individual should have known. Once again, it's very, very vague, and it criminalizes someone who's already been a victim of theft. The reason why this idea has been vetoed numerous times is for that very reason, that it basically turns into a criminal someone who has already been a victim. We also strongly oppose the idea of creating once again another non-violent misdemeanor that is a prohibiting offense. It seems to be kind of a backdoor way for some organizations to figure if we can't ban guns, well then we'll ban people from owning guns and trying to grow the number of people who are then not allowed to own firearms. With all due respect to those who testified in support of this measure, the gun lobby while we are not as monolithic as one would lead you to believe, we do want to see straw purchases ended. This is just not the appropriate way to handle it. We urge your no vote.
Thank you. Others in opposition to the bill? Seeing and hearing none, are there questions or comments from members of the committee? I actually did have a question for either one of you. What do you propose to end or to deal with the problem laid out in this legislation, considering the number of really horrific deaths that have been caused exactly by the straw purchaser giving the gun to the shooter?
Well, first of all, what I would say is that the issue and the challenge that we have here is not a gun violence issue. It's a violence issue. We have an issue. You take, for example, what happened over the weekend. You had an individual who had a violent ideology and belief system, who was radicalized, who then went and quite frankly was under investigation from all aspects of whether it was getting a concealed carry permit, becoming a licensed contractor with someone who worked with the Department of Homeland Security. This was a failure of the system, and we keep trying to pass more laws when the problem is we really need to take a look at is how do we address the issue of violence in our society, and how do we hold those government agencies and entities accountable when they fail the citizenry.
Okay, well, I have to say I would disagree that the government agencies failed the citizenry, unless it was by not having sensible gun regulation. But I do agree that in the long term, we're going to have to address the issues of violence in our culture, racism, other things, and we are going to have to address mental illness in a much more serious and substantive way than we have done. But are there questions or comments from members of the committee at this point, or is there a motion? The bill has been moved, and I wonder, Assembly Member, if you'd like to close.
I would, first with thanks for your consideration and your thoughtfulness, and two quick points in response to some of the opposition. First, that this bill specifically says in Section 2 that it adds a Section 29305 that says that knowing the report to be false. So there's a requirement of knowledge, intentional deception. This is not about a mistake or an oversight or an error. This is about someone who takes an affirmative act to file a police report and literally lie to our police officers and law enforcement and say that a gun was lost or stolen when it wasn't, knowing it to be false. The bills that have earned the governor's veto in the past were bills that made it unlawful to fail to file a report of a gun as lost or stolen. This is different. This is when you take an affirmative step and lie to a police officer and file a false report. So thank you for your consideration. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. The bill has been moved. Please read the roll.
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Glazer?
Aye.
Glazer, aye. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Liu? Aye. Lou, aye. Monning? Stone? No. Stone, no.
That bill has enough votes to pass. We'll hold the roll open for the absent member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues, and staff.
Thank you. I see Assemblyman Hernandez, Assemblymember Cooley left. And after that, Assemblymember Rodriguez. Yeah. Item 7, AB 1505.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senators. I bring before you Assembly Bill 1505, which expands the statute of limitations for violating state and local contracting laws beyond the current one-year limitation. Specifically, this bill was informed by the State Controller's audit in West Covina within my district. The audit brought to light significant findings, such as awarding large contracts without competitive bidding, settling a breach of contract lawsuit due to the city's failing to comply with applicable laws, and the city failing its responsibility to protect taxpayer dollars. The audit revealed a deficiency in the statute of limitations in regards to violating the state and local public contracting laws. The current one-year limitation impedes any recourse for justice in the case of West Covina and cities under similar circumstances. However, Controller Yee highlighted the need for statutory change in this area of the law and stated, I urge the legislature to consider statutory change if we expect to ferret out fraud and prevent willful abuses of state law and taxpayer dollars. That's Controller Yee's statement to us, the legislature. The detailed review of the City of West Covina's administrative and internal accounting controls found serious and pervasive deficiencies, so much so that they failed in about 72 out of 79 areas. So regretfully, West Covina is not alone in the cities that have violated the public's trust. Over the years, there's been many instances of cities, sanitation districts, and water districts that have misused taxpayer dollars and have lacked transparency in following the state and local processes. While it is impossible to audit every single city in the state, it is important that our laws reflect strong and effective means to deter and help the prosecution of cases when the laws are truly violated. For that, I respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you. Speakers in support of the bill?
Madam Chair and Senators, Evan Goldberg with State Controller Betty Yee in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I want to apologize to the committee staff and members for our late support. Our letter went out this morning, but we are here in support of the bill, particularly around construction contracts. When cities or municipalities do what is alleged to have happened in West Covina, low road contractors who maybe don't hire the most highly skilled and trained workers, win bids, and that can also lead to taxpayer dollars being wasted as they have to fix construction defects after the project is done. So for those reasons, we're in support of the bill too. Thank you.
Thank you. Others in support? Speakers in opposition to the bill?
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Ronnie Berdugo here on behalf of the League of California Cities. We want to apologize to the author and to the committee for our late submission of our opposed letter. Unfortunately, these provisions in the Public Contract Code are too often a source of litigation for contractual challenges with for essential public services. So for that reason, we're opposed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move the bill.
Okay, the bill has been moved by Senator Anderson. Senator Glazer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A little confused here. This is a bill that hasn't been voted on in the Assembly yet. Is that right? Oh, I'm just trying to understand, is this a gut and amend?
Yes.
Okay. And so could you explain the reason that it's coming forward to us in this fashion?
Yes, I will. So at the end of last year, Controller Yee provided findings of her investigation of the city of West Covina, and she brought the recommendation to the legislature. The findings were that there were many violations of the law, and this law in particular, the section code that we're trying to effectuate here. She asked the legislature to please consider extending the statute of limitations to 1 year. from 1 year to more years, 3, 4 years if possible. I landed on 3 years, and the thinking behind that was this. Many of the times when violations occur before members of the constituents of the community or watchdog organizations or prosecutors are aware, a year has lapsed. And then you have an investigatory agency come in, like Controller Yee's office. When she came in, a year had already lapsed for most of her findings. So in essence, we were spending taxpayer resources to identify these problems, but at the end, even with the findings, we weren't able to do anything. So as a result of her work, her findings, she made this recommendation. At that time, I made a promise to many citizens in my community that said, can we do something about the statute of limitations? At that time, I asked my staff to find a vehicle, and it was this bill that we chose to gut and amend to advance the need to provide, Californians security that their dollars are going to be protected in the best ways possible.
I see. Could I ask the representative of the League of Cities to come back up here?
Correct. All right. So, Secretary, please note. And are there any witnesses in support? Please come forward.
Sir, I appreciate you coming in to share your thoughts. Can you tell us when you became aware of this issue and why you weren't able to work anything out, or was there any attempt to work things out with the author?
Yeah, we were in communications with the author's staff. We understand that the author is very concerned about what happened in the city of West Covina. I think we share those same concerns. We were in talks about maybe limiting the statute of limitations from 3 years to 2 years, and then we would have been neutral if they had accepted that amendment. But because we weren't able to come to that agreement, we respectfully remain opposed.
So for me, at least, I mean, this is something that obviously I'm as concerned about as the author. But it just seems, though, that the way this has come to us, it troubles me because it seems like something that can get worked out, and yet this bill is coming forward in this fashion, in this way. And I guess it leaves me a little bit troubled that even though I share the concerns of the author, I'm certainly sympathetic to my cities. I have 19 cities in my district, and that their ability to engage with you directly and have that kind of constructive dialogue about clearly a problem that you experience in your district, but why we can't find a common ground with our cities on something like this. They obviously want to do the right thing, and the vast majority of them are doing the right thing. But to pass this legislation over the objections of the League of Cities is a difficult one for me.
Assembly member, yes, would you like to respond?
Senator Glazer, this product came from working with our cities. As a matter of fact, the city of West Covina is in support of AB 1505. The city of West Covina called on the controller's office and joined my office in calling for the investigation. They have a new leadership team there, as the majority of the council are new elected officials. So they asked for it. I worked with them in this process, and we also worked with the League of Cities. The League of Cities came to my office with 2 requests. The first request was that we incorporate in the application of this law to special districts, including water districts, school districts, and we said yes, absolutely. And we couldn't land at reducing the number from 3 years to 2 years, as many of the investigations conducted by the Controller's Office are 2 years, 3 years after the findings. So to make this applicable, we wanted to make sure that we set it up for a reasonable period of time. Honestly, I would have preferred 5 years, but we thought that 3 years was a fair number in terms of time away from the identifying and the known law breaking.
I see. And through the chair, there's nothing in this bill that will affect the city of West Covina, what happened there in the investigation, right? That process is done. Is that correct? That there's nothing that we do here?
I believe so, because the statute of limitations have passed.
Right. So this is all about activity going forward. If further investigations were to reveal that some other city...
I think that's correct. But, so where are you going with that?
Well, I just think that, I guess the urgency for me slips away, that why we need to do a gut and amend on something that I think is certainly seemingly workable with the League of Cities. Seems for me, at least, something that's reasonable, and that's why I'm reluctant to support the bill today if it's going to go forward.
Thank you. I guess that has suggested a question to me. my experience with the League of Cities, with all due respect, I love my cities too, is that they generally oppose anything that would interfere in any way with how a city works. And I don't understand, if 2 years would have been okay, why isn't 3 years okay? Or 4 or 5 if we're catching fraud?
Thank you, Senator, Chair. The difference in the amount of time is you leave cities vulnerable to contractual challenges and potential litigation from competing bidders. And so we're talking about violations of the Public Contract Code. And so a lot of times those provisions are used by competing vendors that will...
Give me an example.
So, for example, if I enter into, if I'm a particular city and I want to enter into a contract to secure public parking meters for a few designated streets, and let's say the cost is $9,000, right? And so you split up, let's say you don't have the staff expertise or somebody doesn't read the fine print in this particular code section, and they split up the project between two different, into two separate orders, right? And then now you leave yourself legally vulnerable to a contractual challenge because you've split up a project that's worth more than $5,000 into two small projects. And so I don't know if that's the best example, but...
Yeah, but I don't understand why 2 years, 3 years, 5 years makes any difference. It would seem you would just be opposed.
I think the difference is that we want to be respectful and work with the author, and we understand that there was a significant problem uncovered in the city of West Covina. I think the longer the statute of limitations, the longer you leave yourself legally vulnerable. And so if, for example, if you're in a long-term contract for, I don't know, 15 years, and somebody comes and challenges that contract, let's say in the second year, then you have to defend against that claim, and so you leave yourself vulnerable to some potential legal costs to have to defend that contract. And if that 15-year contract is then void, then there's some significant cost concerns for cities.
Okay. I guess I'm not reading this as a just a West Covina situation, but it means a great deal to me that our state controller, Betty Yee, found a systemic issue here. And it would seem to me that it would be in the interests of the taxpayers of California not to have rigged bids anywhere. And that this might actually be a very useful preventive piece of legislation. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but as much as we would rather not have gotten amends, it seems to me that on the face of this, this would be a useful piece of legislation for good government.
Senator Stone has a...
Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For the League, you know, when having spent 22 years in local government, when there's a bid challenge, you hear about it right away. You don't usually, wait 2 years to say, well, I think there's a problem with this bid. And I think that your representation of the cities is that, there's constant litigation with regard to bids when they're awarded and having to defend those claims. And it sounds like to me that the League's position is that extending the statute of limitation is increasing their long-term liability at a time when people's memories fade. There may not be witnesses that can come forward. So I don't see this as a pervasive problem throughout the state of California, unless you can tell me otherwise. It seems like it's an incident, and we all know that Sacramento commonly has knee-jerk reactions to incidents and broad brushes legislation, and I would think that the cities have a valid concern here, and taxpayer money going to litigation many years after the fact, after bids have been given. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, the league representative.
No, I think that that's exactly the case. And you know, from our understanding, we didn't know that the city of West Covina was in support of the bill. But we do know that the city of West Covina took certain steps to address the concerns that were identified in the state controller's audit. They hired a new city manager. They hired a new public works director. They revamped a lot of their public contracting means and methodology. And so we think that there are opportunities for cities to address violations if they are uncovered without having the legal exposure to contractual and litigation challenges.
And one last final word, if I may, one last. Would this bill, Assemblyman Hernandez, prohibit a city from entering into a tolling agreement in the event that a statute of limitations, if it were at 1 year or 3 years, was in effect? Would that prevent them from doing tolling agreements?
What kind of agreement?
Tolling agreement?
I don't understand what that is.
A tolling agreement is, I'm not a lawyer, but a tolling agreement is when you have two lawyers from both sides that agree that the litigation is going to go beyond a statute of limitations, and both sides agree to extend that deadline that they can.
Oh, staff says that it only applies in criminal
No, in
cases.
civil. This is only civil, criminal. So there's no,
There's no application, from my understanding.
that would be only in a civil case. This is a criminal statute.
I qualified to say I'm not an attorney.
Neither was I. That's why I asked for the explanation.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
That leads to, I guess, page 5 on, of the analysis is that while I don't have a problem with the statute of limitations with which this bill deals with, but the bigger problem is the size of the contract and breaking up contracts among cities to go underneath the limit so they don't have to have this exposure. And so, your bill doesn't have anything to do with that, but there seems to be a bigger problem here that's among cities and contracts, et cetera, not so much about the statute of limitations. So with that, I would move the bill.
Okay. The bill has been moved. Would you like to close?
Just a quick note, Madam Chair and Senators. While the League would like to report this bill as being a West Covina story, we know whether it's the cities of Irwindale, City of Industry, the cities of Bell, and cities up and down our state, this one town is one of 500 plus cities in California. These issues are not exclusive to West Covina, California. We know better than this. We shouldn't be allowed to have this matter framed as a one city issue. This bill is important. If we really care about making sure that there is a pathway to recourse and finding justice for our taxpayers. And with that, I respectfully ask your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the clerk please read the roll?
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson?
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Glazer? No. Glazer, no. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Lou? Aye. Lou, aye. Monning? Stone?
No.
Stone, no.
Okay. That bill has enough votes to pass, but we'll hold the roll open for the absent members.
Thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Rodriguez. Item 13, your other two bills were on consent. AB 1705.